This is going to be a series of videos. I'm going to break down the different parts of the 107 that you need to know, and it's up to date. I'm including remote ID and flights over people, night flights, all the stuff that wasn't released when this first came out. So if you've been watching other videos on YouTube, they're probably not as current, and this is really important that you know all the information. So check a link down below if you're looking for a particular subject or part of the 107 that you need to study. I've got that for you. Plus, I also have some study guides that I've built. Now, I've taught this class to high school students, so I've given them some additional resources, and I've got those for you down below. So print it out, follow along, fill in the blanks, and maybe that'll help you study. Now, if you find this information useful and you want to help support the channel, there are a couple of links down below on ways you can do that. And why not just give it a thumbs up, click the subscribe button, that helps as well. So keep in mind, when you take this test, it is a multiple choice exam. There are 3 questions, and a lot of times one of those answers isn't a very good one. So if you kind of know this information, you'll be able to eliminate at least one, hopefully, and then you're down to a 50-50 chance. Now, you're going to use this test supplement that the testing center gives you. You can bring a calculator, you might not need it, some scratch paper. There's a little bit of math. We'll talk about that here in one of these videos. Now, this test supplement, I've created a condensed version, right? It's really thick. You don't need every page. I suggest you print out the condensed version that I created for you. I basically just took out the pages you don't need, and remember the legend. That thing is key. A lot of the answers to the test are found on the legend, so keep that in mind when you're taking the test. Keep referencing that. If it's asking for an airspace, or is this a lighted obstruction or group obstruction, all those things, they're in there. Lots of information in there. So make sure you're referencing that while you're taking the test. I've got some additional resources for people that are Patreons. That starts at $1 a month. So if that's something you're interested in, again, more information down below. You also may be interested in buying a drone. Now, we've done extensive breakdowns on all sorts of different drones and all sorts of different price ranges for all sorts of different purposes. You know, check the link down below for some of those videos. And if you're looking for the TLDR version of that, we got links down below for drones broken down by price range. Anyway, so let's get into the Part 107 study. Okay, so this video we're going to focus on some 107 rules and regulations, just some general stuff that you need to know, numbers, ages, rules, and things like that. So one thing you need to know, how old do you have to be to take the test? Well, you got to be at least 16 years old. You'd have to test every 2 years. And certain drones get registered, right? The maximum weight for a drone that you can fly without having to go through this giant hoop and process is 55 pounds. Who has to use the 107? Who doesn't? Well, you don't have to use 107. You don't have to file for 107 if you're just flying for fun, right? You don't have to do this if you're flying balloons, rockets, or kites. This is just for unmanned aerial vehicles if you're trying to make money. Now, how long do you have to notify the FAA if anything changes, change of address, things like that? You have 30 days. They want you to know that. Now, there are a handful of people that you need to understand that are part of your crew. The most important is the remote pilot in command. Sometimes we call that person the remote PIC. And basically, that person is in charge of everything. That person is responsible for everything. That person is almost always the answer to the test question. If you happen to get a question, who is the person responsible? The person manipulating the controls can be the remote PIC, but that's basically just the person that is flying the drone. It doesn't have to be, right? I could have my buddy fly and then I'm watching them. I'm the remote pilot in command because I have the 107 and my buddy is flying because it makes more sense that way. And then we could have a visual observer. That is the person that is watching the drone, right? They need to make sure they have a visual line of sight. Now, if you're flying FPV, you're under the goggles, you can only do so if you have a visual observer. So something to keep in mind. Now, I mentioned briefly you have to register your drone. When do you have to register? What are all the rules? Well, let's kind of go over that. If your drone weighs less than 250 grams or 0.55 pounds, you don't have to register it. But if it's between 0.55 and 55 pounds, you have to register it. You go over to the Drone Zone. It's an FAA regulated website, and you can register there. It's going to cost you $5. If you're a 107 pilot, it's $5 per drone. If you're a hobbyist, it's just $5 for all your drones. Now you have to put a label on it. It has to be visible, easily accessible. You don't have to, it has to be visible without having to use tools, right? So you can put it in the battery compartment if that just opens. Easily accessible and visible is important, and you should have a certificate printed off. Save a file on your phone that shows that you have these drones registered. Okay. Now you have to be 13 years old to register a drone. Now you got to be 16 in order to pass this test or take this test, but you can have a drone, you can register a drone if you're 13 years old or older. If you're not 13, then you got to have someone that is older register it for you. Other things you need to know, important numbers. Maximum speed was the fastest you can fly a drone. Well, that's 100 miles an hour, also known as 87 knots. Minimum visibility. Oftentimes we talk about statute miles. You hear that term. That's just a regular mile as you and I probably perceive miles here in the United States. So 3 miles of minimum visibility. That means you have to be able to see from here to 3 miles away clearly without things in your path or clouds or fog or anything like that. That is the minimum visibility. We'll get into kind of more of that later on. Cloud clearance. Now, if there are clouds, you have to be at least 500 feet lower than the clouds and 2,000 feet horizontally away from the clouds. Those are just a couple of rules, and again, we'll touch on some of that later. Maximum altitude limit. How high can you fly? You can fly 400 feet from the ground, right? You can also fly 400 feet over a structure within a 400-foot radius. So let's say I'm flying at a house, and the house is, I don't know, 50 feet tall. It's a big house. I can fly 450 feet now because I can go 400 feet plus 50 feet from the house, 450 feet, as long as I'm within 400 feet of that house. And you probably would be because you want to be able to see, you want to be close, and that's just how people are going to fly. Okay, other things you might want to know. Can you fly from a moving vehicle? Yeah, if it's a sparsely populated area or if you're on a boat, you can do that. Can't fly from a moving aerial vehicle, so keep that in mind. Can you fly your drone beyond your visual line of sight? Well, no, but yes, if that is just for a brief moment of time, you're going behind a tree, behind an obstacle, it's, going to come out, you got someone else helping you out, yes, you can do that. Alcohol limits, in the state of Illinois anyway, that's where I am, it's 0.08 to drive a car, it's 0.04, so it's twice as strict to fly a drone than it is to drive a car. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is nationwide, not just Illinois. 0.04 plus, you have to have a minimum of 8 hours since the last time you took a drink. So again, a lot more strict. You have to meet both of those criteria. Now, this is a question that I've seen on the Part 107 exam. Who should you contact if you have questions about medications? That is your local aviation medical examiner, your AME, or you consult the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. You're probably not going to do that. If you have questions about medications, I suggest you talk to your pharmacist, but that is the actual answer that the FAA is looking for. Now, this test, they're looking for very specific answers to very specific questions. So when I talk about when do you have to register a drone, if it is 250 grams or more, right? It's not, it's not like they're very specific, right? 249 grams, no. 250, yes. 250 and up. So just little things, little nuances that you have to know. Okay, so other things you got to keep in mind. What documents can the FAA request to view? Well, they want to request your flight logs. Flight logs, see what I did there? And also, they could request your maintenance records. Now, a lot of drones, they will keep this stuff in the app. Make sure you double check that. It's always good to make sure you're keeping good records of your flights and things like that, your maintenance, battery usage, things like. Now, how should you maintain your UAV, your drone? Well, they're going to say, well, according to the manufacturer's recommended procedures, right? The handbook that you get with that, you probably didn't get one, right? Or maybe it's online, or it's just not clear. If that's the case, then you have to kind of just document things along the way. But manufacturers' suggested procedures is the way to go, and they will ask that question on the FAA exam. Now remember, the test itself is multiple choice, 3 questions, and generally you can probably eliminate one of those 3 questions. So hopefully you got a 50-50 shot at this thing. Other things the FAA may want you to know, physiology, how do you feel? How do things affect the pilot? One of those is dehydration, right? You have to know that dehydration can cause fatigue, dizziness, nausea, poor decision making. So make sure you're drinking plenty of water when you fly. Hyperventilation is something that happens when you get stressed, right? That's overbreathing. It's heavy breathing, and that can have, again, negative effects on the pilot and make it difficult for you to fly. If you're under stress, what is the first thing you should do? This is, again, a question I've seen on the exam itself. Maintain control of your aircraft. That's step number 1, right? Then take a deep breath, figure out what you're going to do next, but maintain control of your aircraft, priority number 1. All right, one of the things the FAA has put together is the I'm Safe acronym to kind of help you go through the checklist to make sure that you're safe and able to fly. We'll have another handful of acronyms later in a different video that the FAA suggests you go through. I is for illness. Are you sick? M is for medication. Are you taking any medication that might hinder your performance as the remote pilot in command? S as in stress. Are you stressed out to the point you shouldn't be flying? A, have you had any alcohol? Is that impairing your judgment? Don't fly. F for fatigue. Are you tired? Do you need to rest before you fly? E can either stand for emotion or eating. I've seen it both ways. Are you overly emotional or are you hungry? I get hangry. You don't want to fly hangry, right? And neither does the FAA. Okay, so what about night rules? Can you fly at night? Well, yeah, if you're a 107 pilot, you sure can, but there are certain things you need to know, and one of them is civil twilight. What is the definition of civil twilight? That is something I've seen on the test. It's basically 30 minutes before sunrise, 30 minutes after sunset. Now, you can get this information on pretty much any weather app, or most weather apps, I should say. I oftentimes will check that out. Great time to fly. You get these beautiful colors in the sky. Things are soft. Fly at these times, but make sure you know what you're doing and make sure you're following the rules. So what do you need to know in terms of flying? What do you have to add to your drone? Do you have to add anything? Probably you need flashing anti-collision lights that can be seen for a minimum of 3 statute miles. That means I need to be able to see that drone 3 miles away, that light flashing. Again, statute miles is just regular old miles. A nautical mile is different. We're not going to get into that. Okay, so you're flying. How do you scan, right? You need to be able to scan. The FAA says very clearly 30-degree increments for 2 to 3 seconds at a time, right? So you're just kind of scanning along the way. All right. What are the light requirements for the aircraft? And this is pretty standard, right? If you're looking at planes in the air, you'll see this. The left side of the drone or plane is red. The right side of the plane is green, and the tail light is white. Now, drones don't always follow those rules. So look at your drone and see how it's set up. It may just be front and back, red and green, maybe all white, who knows? That is for airplanes, and that is for you to understand, right? If I see a plane and I see these lights, it'll help you be able to understand which way that plane is flying. All right, so another thing you need to know is what color is easiest for your eyes to adjust to at night, and that's red, right? That's why taillights on cars are red. And how long does it take your eyes to adjust at night? Well, that's going to take you 30 minutes. That's, again, another question that could be on the test. Now, little helpful hint, you can wear an eye patch like a pirate, right? So that you immediately adjust. That's why pirates wore eye patches, because when they went under deck, they could take them off and start slashing whatever. Information you don't need to know, but something to keep in mind. Now, the FAA has come up with 6 different night illusions that you need to be aware of, really, and how do you combat them, right? So if this is happening to you, what can you do? The first one I'm going to talk about is autokinesis, and that's kind of phantom motion. If you're staring at a light against a dark background for too long, it kind of seems like it's starting to move when it probably isn't, right? Focus your eyes at different points, right? And use scanning techniques to combat that, right? Fixation or fascination is when you are ignoring your visual cues and you're just focused on something. Again, you can cause all sorts of different problems, but just scan, right? Scan around so that you're not stuck there. We've got the reversible perception, right? So at night, it's often hard to determine, is it moving away from you? Is it moving toward you? Things just get a little bit trickier. Look at those lights on the airplane, right? If that's what we're looking at, and that'll help you determine whether it's coming towards or away. And again, kind of note what your drone lights are. That'll be helpful too. Flicker, size, distance. Sometimes dim objects appear further away, or we assume that they're further away, and bright objects are closer. Scout, right? Go where you're flying, especially if you're flying at night, and check that out ahead of time and kind of note where things are in relation to you or where you'll be flying. And then we have flicker, vertigo. So lights flickering at particular frequencies can make people sick, right? It just happens to some people, and you can kind of scan, not stare, and that will help you. And then we have the black hole approach. This is really more for pilots, landing. So if you're flying, over terrain where there just isn't anything, maybe it's water or whatnot, it's hard to understand where the runway is. So, again, know where you are, know where you're landing, and things like that, and that will be, of course, super helpful. So that's it for this particular lesson, but there are other lessons, things you need to know. Look down below, and again, if you haven't checked out the study guides to kind of follow along, fill in the blanks, it's going to be helpful in terms of helping you remember some of this information. Check out our Patreon. I have some other resources for you there, and if this was helpful, love for you to use one of those affiliate links to make a purchase if you're going to buy a drone, or throw a few bucks our way so that Chris or I can buy a cup of coffee or maybe even a beer. Good luck, everyone. Happy flying.